Okay. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. We just have to determine who he is. That's all. And I got a pretty good idea, but the details are not there. And it's all about power, really. If I had never experienced any power, then I wouldn't believe. I wouldn't believe at all. I'd just say, this is just craziness, and I wouldn't believe. But I've experienced such amazing power, not just power, but amazing power. And communication at times with God. I've had good communication going on at times with God. God of Jesus, which I thought was the God of Moses. But if you look closely at the Bible, you can compare doctrine to doctrine, old and new. Well, intellectually, it doesn't combine. It doesn't harmonize. It doesn't agree. It just doesn't agree. It's a mystery. That God is a mystery. Ultimately, he's totally mysterious as a rule in everything he does. You know, he could pour out power like a lot, but he doesn't do it. And then suddenly he'll just pour out power. I said, why? We don't know. We have no clue. And then he's gone. And then you don't see him. And people say, well, God is dead. No, I said, no, he's not dead. He's just not doing anything for you. If he'd do something for you, you'd know he wasn't dead. Suddenly he'd just appear and say, wow, where's he been? Wow, good question. Nobody knows where he's been. And then suddenly he's back. Or he's not back. And like I was saying before, and I keep saying this because this is the bottom line, is that where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst, is what Jesus said. And that's the bottom line. If you want to experience the power of God, the healing power of God, Jesus is the healer. I don't know of any healing ministry in the Jewish religion, not modern day. And I'm going to do a study, an in-depth study, maybe next, on the lives of Elijah and Elisha, as they had healing ministries. And I'm just going to be fascinated. And I'll be an expert at it when I'm done. So what I'm really doing is I'm just recording my spiritual journey, my biblical journey, my journey of Bible study. And it's amazing what I've discovered. It just goes on forever. The Bible's just full of contradictions. A lifetime of contradictions. It's fascinating. It's amazing that there is that many contradictions in a book that's supposed to be about the same God. Like the rabbi was saying a couple of months ago, he was saying, they try to make the old and the new agree. That was roughly what he said. They try to make the Old Testament and the New Testament be the same. And that's what I've done. But if you really look at it closely, there's some problems with doing that. Major problems. The major problem it just doesn't work. It doesn't really work if you really look at it closely. If you look at it honestly, Because if you look at it dishonestly, there's tons and tons of people around that turn a blind eye to the Old Testament that are Christians, and they don't even acknowledge it really. All they do, and they don't even acknowledge the New Testament really. A lot of religions, the preacher, he's not going to get into the Bible, no, because he might get some kind of a backlash. Because there's a lot of people out there, they don't want to hear it. They might take him down from his throne as pastor. So that's the essence of Christianity, is where two or three are gathered. And you, like I was saying before, you talk about the power of Jesus, read about how he had all this healing power, raise the dead, heal the sick, speak to the weather, control the weather, multiply bread and fish. And then he became an offering for sin. And then he raised back again. And that's it. That's the gospel. Anything else is contradictory. And it's amazing that it's there time and time again. And so we're going to look at a whole bunch today again. Incredible. It's incredible. Starting at Matthew 12. Well, I want to review because I really didn't finish that subject that I was on in the last one. The point I was making. And I want to review a little bit so that you know where I'm coming from. But we were talking about what Jesus said in Matthew 12, 6 through 8. It's in the other synoptic. I believe it's in Mark and Luke or whatever, this statement. It could be in John. I saw something in John that was also in the others. So it's possible, but most of the time it's in the Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But it says, verse 6, but I say to you, there is one here who is greater than the temple. Jesus was talking about himself. And so basically what he was doing, he was exalting himself above the God of the Old Testament. Because the temple was all about the manifestation of God. And he was saying he was greater than that. Greater than the manifestation in the inner tabernacle, otherwise known as the inner sanctuary, otherwise known as the presence of God, otherwise known as the Holy of Holies. He was saying, I am greater. What? Oh, that's incredible. Because that contradicts what he said most of the time. In the synoptic, and he really doesn't say that he's greater than ever. I mean, in fact, he said, my Father is greater than me. My Father is greater than all. So this contradicts, but it's there. It's right there in black and white. He says, I am greater than the presence of God in the temple. That's all we know. All we know is that it was a manifestation, the presence, the person of God, power of God. So that contradicts what he said all the time, really. But still, it's there. Verse 7, now if you had known what this means, then he makes this statement here that doesn't make any sense, really. It doesn't make any harmonious sense. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, he would not have condemned the guiltless. And all he's talking about is the fact that they were condemning the disciples for going into that. I went over this before, so you'll have to listen to the other one if you haven't listened to it. They were condemning the disciples for, basically the bottom line is, for going in and picking some into a field, just going into some field, okay, and eating some fruit or vegetable, whatever. That's what we determined. So, but then the last statement again, so here's another statement, just like verse 6. Verse 8. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. So what is he saying here? Now he's saying that he is the new God. He's the new ruler. He didn't say God is the Lord, my Father is the Lord of the Sabbath day. He says, I am the Lord of the Sabbath day. Well, that's saying I am God. The same as verse 6. He's saying he's greater than the God of the Old Testament, because we've read that the God of the Old Testament said, if you broke the Sabbath, you had to be killed. That was the God of the Old Testament. But then Jesus said, but I'm now the Lord of these commandments. I'm now rewriting these commandments. I am now redoing them. I am now reestablishing them, reiterating them in a different way. I am changing them. And in this case, he's saying he is now God over the Sabbath. He can do different things. Yet, like I said before, the accusation against the disciples was a totally ridiculous accusation. It wasn't even legitimate. I do these messages so I can listen to them later for entertainment. It's better than listen to the news. It's better than listening to the YouTube videos about wars and all the people that are fighting against each other and hurting each other, killing each other. And that's what I did when I drove for a living, is I recorded about 500 messages, maybe more, maybe 700, and I would listen to them as I drove. And that would motivate me, because you get bored. If you're driving along, nothing on the radio, and after a while, all your music, you've heard it all. You can have 3,000 or 4,000 songs, but then after a while, you've heard them all. You need a break. You need a break from them. Well, they're still great, but I don't want to listen to them every day. You can't listen to them every day anyway. So, I thoroughly enjoy listening to these messages again, but then there's only so many of them. I don't want to go through them too quick, because then they'll be gone. I won't have anything else to listen to, unless I want to listen to audio. But then my messages have evolved, so a lot of them are a little annoying because I'm talking about Paul a little bit. I still hadn't divorced Paul. I still hadn't seen the reality of Paul, of what Paul was really saying in opposition to Jesus. And I'm still believing all the writings that we have from this Saul of Tarsus, And so, for the most part, although I like some of the things he said, I don't want to hear them. Like, I have a bunch of messages. I have a bunch of scripture sheets that I use when I'm riding the stationary bike. I'll look at them, but I don't want to read the ones on Paul. No, because I know where Paul was coming from. I don't agree with the doctrines of Paul for the most part, but some of them. Well, some of them are all right. Some of them are good. Some of them are right on. Well, some of the statements are good. I think I like them. I think they're true. I personally think they're true. But for the most part, I don't want to hear his writings anymore. So I have two more verses. There's so much to this, what was just said, because these are two more versions, because this is, actually this version right here is the faithful version. And then these here are the contemporary English version and the King James version. Well, let me just say that this verse right here, Jesus is advocating this verse, which is found in Hosea, and we also found it in the Psalms, amazingly. It's like anti-sacrifice. And everything in the Old Testament, all the writings of Moses, even down to much later in the Bible, was all about animal sacrifice. But here it's saying, I desire mercy. And then you might say, well, what does that mean? You desire mercy. And there's a couple more versions I'll read. But it's saying here that he doesn't want sacrifice. So who would believe? Who knew that Jesus was advocating what Hosea and what we read in the Psalms, where David was also saying that, but then he also contradicted himself in the same, I think it was the same verse or the next verse. But he's going against sacrifice of animals and trying to claim something like he desired mercy. So we have the comparison of sacrifice and then what is the other side of the coin. We're going to look at that. And as we move on, first look at these other verses. Here's the contemporary English version. This is like amazing. Don't you know what the scriptures mean when they say, instead of offering sacrifices to me, I want you to be merciful to others. If you knew what this means, you would not condemn these innocent disciples of mine. Hello. So this version is trying to bring the meaning of this out, and it did, which is in contradiction, of course, with all the quotes from God in the writings of Moses. This is the opposite. And then King James says, but if you had known what this means, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. And so I talked about this last time, how it appears that means I will have mercy on people and there's no need for any sacrifice. I'll operate in mercy. That's how we're going to do it, which is not the same. No. Now, that's not the same message. It's a different message, a different statement, a different doctrine, a different meaning. But then we find in 1 Samuel that the original word on this is not about mercy and sacrifice, it's about obedience. Obedience or sacrifice. So what happened? It was corrupted down the line by David, and then apparently the prophet Hosea copied David, Maybe he read the words of David and then he just repeated them. That sounds right. When it had nothing to do with mercy, it had to do with obedience to the laws given of God, the God of Moses, or animal sacrifice. What's more important to God, right? So now let's read 1 Samuel, a bunch of verses in chapter 15. That shows 18 and then 20 through 23. And the Lord sent you on the way and said, go and completely destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until you destroy them all. I added that word all. Verse 20, and Saul said to Samuel, yes, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord and have gone the way which the Lord sent me and have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have completely destroyed the Amalekites. So Saul was a major hypocrite. He was selfish, very self-serving. Because what he did is he killed everybody, babies, old people, women, supposedly. It's hard to believe, right? But since he was a king, he didn't want to kill the king because he's a king. Obviously. And so he took the king and he took him alive, but he killed all the babies and all the women. Right away, God is the God of Moses, or the God of Saul, you might say, but they did that with the day of Joshua and the day of Moses to kill babies, children, mothers, old people. That's not mercy, okay? Right away, you realize when it says, I would desire mercy, well, he's commanding killing, not mercy. So that's a complete contradiction of saying, or claiming, let's say, that somehow God wanted you to do mercy rather than sacrifice. No, in this case, with Saul, he wanted him to do butchering, killing, wholesale murder, really. So that's the complete opposite of mercy. Then it goes on to say in verse 21, but the people took from the spoil of the flocks and herd the best of the things devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. So he obeyed all the commandment to kill the people, and like I went over, the babies and whatever. But then he didn't want to kill the animals. He was an animal lover. So he didn't want to do that. He rejected that idea. He says, "Look, I'm not going to do that. No, I don't want to do that." So and then he used the excuse that it would be used for sacrificing. So that would be a good thing. He says, "No, it's a good thing because then we can do a lot of sacrifice to God. We can kill a lot of animals. We'll kill them to God." Yeah. But that wasn't what God had commanded. He wanted them, and that makes no sense either, that God wanted them to kill all the animals. What did they do? They're just being an animal. They were just minding their own business, those animals. And then verse 22, and Samuel said, does the Lord have as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. You see? So that's the true comparison. That's the true comparison. You either obey or you do sacrifice. And what do you want to do? If you don't obey, then you sacrifice, but how? And that doesn't make any sense either. So all you have to do is just do anything you want. You can disobey all you want, and then just sacrifice. No. That's why the people in the New Testament, they'll do whatever they want, and then they figure, well, Jesus died for my sins, so it's not a problem. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. I can do anything I want to, and then I just say, forgive me of my sins, and then you're cool, you know? But he says, to hearken or listen is better than the fat of rams. So that would be as what God would desire. He would desire, the God of the Old Testament, he would desire obedience rather than sacrificing animals. But then somehow got changed, and they're saying, I desire mercy. No, that's a different doctrine. That's a totally different doctrine. Totally different message. Then he goes on, verse 23, and move that up. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. So now he's calling him a witch. He's claiming that the witches don't do that. As far as I know, there's no army of witches that have been going around killing people. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. And I say, no, he was just a selfish person, Saul. He was self-centered, self-serving, hypocritical individual who didn't want to kill another king because he was a king, and that's it. And he had a mind of his own. He said, look, these are great suggestions, God, but I want to modify them a little bit. I have my own version. But God, the God of the Old Testament, rejected that. And because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. So he said, no, he didn't do it. He didn't do everything I said. He didn't kill everybody. He saved the king. He saved the animals. So Saul rejected that decree too, and he wasn't going to be dethroned, because David was ascending to the throne, and he said, well, I'll just kill David. That's all. So he didn't have a problem with killing David, and he couldn't have cared less about the commandments of God, but yet God made him king. Why? God knew he was never going to, I would think that God knew he was never going to care about what God said or what the commandments said. Plus, the commandments say, do not kill. So I've been over this. It's a major, major, major contradiction where God says, do not kill. And then down the line it says, okay, I want you to go kill thousands. Unmercifully. Unmercifully. But I thought about it quite a bit, and I said, well, how would it have happened if I was a soldier and I had to go in, and Joshua or Moses or Saul said, okay, I want you to go in, you got to kill everybody in there, the babies, the women, the old people, whatever. And you got your sword, and just do away with them. And I said, well, how would they do that? What would be the best way to do that? Well, I said, really, all you got to do is just hit them with the sword, because it says that in another part of the Bible, they struck them with the sword. That's really all you had to do. And basically, you're going to open up a massive wound in the body, and that's it. Then they just, basically what happens is somebody would bleed to death. How are you going to stop? I don't know if you can stop the bleeding if you have a wound that's 6 or 12 inches and you have no doctors or anything that can do what they do. I don't know what they would do either, but it would be difficult. And so they would just all bleed to death, that's all. It's really simple. You don't have to stab them in any way or do anything like that. Just cut them a real big slice in the flesh so that the blood just pours out, and that is the end of them. And they just lose all their blood, and that's the end. So then we move to Matthew 15, verses 1 through 11 in the AFV. And it says, "And then the scribes and the Pharisees from Jerusalem came to Jesus, saying, 'Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread.' But he answered and said to them, 'Why do you also transgress the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God commanded, saying, Honor your father and mother, and the one who speaks evil of father or mother, let him die the death. But you say,'" now I don't like this statement, so I wrote my own after it, below it, but I looked at all the versions and they don't have anything different. And I think it's just terrible statement. "But you say, whoever shall say to father or mother, whatever benefit you might receive from me is being given as a gift to the temple." That makes no sense to me. He is not at all obligated to honor his father or his mother. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I wrote a nice modern translation of that. See that below that? My modern translation, because nobody else has it. "But you say it's all right and not a problem if someone speaks evil of their father or mother." See, that's really what they did. But that's the natural thing to do. And then the next verse says, "And you have made void the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition." But I wrote mercy, because really that's what mercy is all about. Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." Well, we just saw how the God of the Old Testament didn't really specialize in mercy. And so that's what a person has if they have a child. And basically, in the Old Testament, when they talk about this doctrine of killing the child, killing your kid, right? It's as if he's a drunkard and a glutton, then he's to be killed. That's it. Those two things, which is not even mentioned, of course. But even if you have a child that's a drunkard and a glutton, if you have mercy, you don't kill them. I mean, that's just off the charts. Outrageous, really. You know, we would lock anybody up. People will be locked up if they did that for the rest of their lives, if not executed. Maybe in some state they'd be executed, but they, the law would come and get you, and you tell them, yeah, but he was a drunken and a glutton. Well, Sorry, you're going to jail for the rest of your life. Or we're going to put you in the electric chair. Or a firing squad. Some people are, I think they're using that, or they're trying to bring it back in some states. They're trying to bring back a firing squad. But the killers don't like that. They can kill other people, but they don't want to get killed. But I'm all for the death penalty. You know, people that are clearly multi-murderers. Habitual. Verse 7. Hypocrites, Isaiah has prophesied well concerning you, saying, these people have drawn near to me with their mouths, and with their lips they honor me, but their hearts are far from me. Right, they're not willing to kill their kids. Very unfortunate. But they worship me in vain, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men. Well, that's right, they don't go along with killing their children if they're not perfect. Verse 10, and after calling the multitude to him, he said to them, hear and understand. That which goes into the mouth does not defile the man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles the man. But I say, that which comes out of the mouth can defile the man for sure, but that which goes into the mouth can also defile the man. Of course it can. If you eat something, if all you eat is chemicals, there are substances, there are things that grow. If you eat a lot of fat, poisonous plants, different chemicals. People put chemicals now in all the foods that you buy, and they don't have to tell you what they are. They'll say it's natural flavor. They'll say it's natural flavoring. Well, what is it? There's already natural flavoring. There's already natural flavoring. There's already a flavor. Why do you have to add something called natural flavoring? There's already a natural flavor. Ridiculous. But they allow it. They allow these things, the government, the totally corrupt government we have. So I want to read one more section which completes what I was talking about with the washing of the hands, because that was the original accusation by the Jewish leaders to Jesus, that they weren't washing their hands, which I firmly believe in, big time. Bacteria. Get that bacteria off of your hands, or whatever else is on them. So here's something which is interesting, to say the least. Exodus 30. Well, there's 3 verses. Actually, they're all different verses. 2 of them are from Exodus 30, and one of them is from Deuteronomy 21. And this is what the priests had to do. Hello. Exodus 30, verse 19. For Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and their feet there. So God was commanding them. Okay? Here it is again, where Jesus is commanding something, or he is allowing something and not commanding something that has been commanded by God. Because they said, you're not asking your disciples to wash their hands. They're eating with dirty hands. And so, once again, Jesus is disregarding the commandments that came before. It goes on forever, really. I mean, Jesus said, all that came before me are thieves and robbers. And it finally dawned on me, I said, all? You mean Moses And everybody in the Old Testament was a thief and a robber? Why would he say such a thing? That's not right. That doesn't make any sense. That's what it says in the Gospel of John. So then it goes on in the 21st verse. They shall wash their hands and their feet so that they do not die. So this is how important it was. God was saying that if they didn't wash their hands and their feet, they would die. And you can just guess why. I mean, the bacteria and so forth, because they were slaughtering animals. They were butchering animals with a lot of blood and guts. And very important to wash after they did it, big time. But it can be applied to anything. It should be applied to everything you do. It should be a law, big time, that you follow. I mean, people of those days didn't know anything about bacteria and microbes and viruses, microscopic organisms. They didn't know anything about that. They had no microscopes. No. And it says, and it shall be a statute or a law forever to them. Forever. To them and to his seed throughout their generations. All the animals that they said, that God said not to eat. And then the New Testament, they said, you can eat anything you want to. All the disciples and apostles, that's what they believed. Total contradiction. Complete opposite. Completely different. And lastly, Deuteronomy 21, verse 6, and all the elders of that city, nearest to the slain one, shall wash their hands over the heifer that has been beheaded in the stream. I'm not going to go any farther than that. If you can read that and try to figure out what they're talking about. But that has to do with one of the laws. It was just an amazing amount of laws. Too many. All these different detailed laws. And here's another example of them. It was a ritual, call it a ritual, religious practice, supposedly a spiritual practice. And that was what they had to do. They had to wash their hands. They had to wash their hands over the dead animal that they had beheaded, apparently. So I'll leave it at that, and then we'll go on to another set of contradictions next week.